Hi, sixth graders, welcome back. Today we're reviewing Unit 3 content on monotheism in Africa. Our goals are to describe the spread of monotheistic religions and the characteristics of West African kingdoms. So let's first start off by talking about monotheism. Mono as a prefix means one, and theism means belief in God. So monotheism means to believe in one God. There are three major monotheistic religions in the world today, and we're going to learn about all three today. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are the three major monotheistic religions around today. So let's talk about the one that emerged first, and that was Judaism. Judaism was founded by Abraham as the first major monotheistic religion. Christianity and Islam both trace their roots back to Judaism, so the three monotheistic religions are all called Abrahamic, and they get that name from the Judaism founder Abraham. People who follow Judaism are Jews. And so here are some major symbols in this religion. Jews wear the Star of David as a symbol of Judaism. This is the menorah here, which is popular or important for a Jewish holiday. And this here is the Torah, which holds the Jewish writing. But we're going to focus mostly on the spread of these different religions. So let's start with Judaism. Judaism began in the Middle East, as did Christianity and Islam. But after a famine, the Jews were forced to leave their homeland. So what happened was it didn't rain for a long time. And when it doesn't rain, water can't get to crops. And so eventually the land dries up and the crops all die. So there was a famine. There was not enough food. When you hear famine, you see the F for famine, F for food. There's not enough food in a famine. So this leads to thousands of years with no Jewish state. The Jews actually go to Egypt for a while, and historians think that maybe not, they were enslaved by the Egyptians. And then after a while, you guys learned about how Moses, the Exodus, we're not, we're a little iffy on whether or not that is historically accurate, but the story says that he leads them out of Egypt and back into Canaan. Today, the Jewish state of Israel exists on parts of the land that was once Canaan, which is the original homeland of the Jews. But it's caused conflict with the Palestinians, who also claim rights to the land. So here we are in New Orleans. Let's continue to orient ourselves. Remember, here's where we learned about Egypt and Mesopotamia, India, China. Judaism was founded here in what we call the Middle East. So it's kind of between Europe, Asia, and Africa. And it was founded in a place called Canaan. So they went and Canaan. They lived in Egypt for a while, and then Moses brought them back to the Middle East. Here is the desert that they wandered through before they got back. It took a long while to get there. And then today, if we were to go around and look for where can we find Jews, the darker the blue, the more Jews live in the area. So we see that there's a good number of Jewish people living in New Orleans, or not New Orleans, the United States. This really, really dark space right here is Israel. And so that's in the middle of the Middle East, which is mostly Muslim. And that's why there's some conflict there because the land was taken from the Muslims who originally lived there. All right, the next religion is Christianity. Christianity was founded by Jesus 1800 years after Judaism. It shares many of the same religious stories as in the Jewish Torah in their Old Testament. And that's because Jesus was a Jew. So this religion came out of the Jewish faith. So we see Judaism is founded, and then 1800 years later, Christianity begins. And then just kind of looking ahead, we're going to see that Islam is founded a good bit after that. So again, focusing on the spread of these religions, early on, Christianity did not have a homeland. In fact, Christians were persecuted. To be persecuted is to be treated unfairly by the Roman Empire. So Christians were treated unfairly by the Roman Empire. Once the Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity and made it the official religion of the Roman Empire, Christianity rapidly rises in popularity. So before we get to that, let's look here. This is a gladiator show in Rome. So these were shows where enslaved people, poor people, sometimes volunteers, sometimes criminals would come and they would fight each other or fight wild animals to the death. Another thing that was popular was to put Christians in here and have them be either murdered by people or by animals. And people thought that was fun. But this was an example of how they were persecuted in Rome. They really were not treated fairly. They were treated badly. But once Emperor Constantine says, I practice Christianity and I want the Empire of Rome to practice it as well, um, it became the official religion of Rome. And then it rapidly spread around the world. So this right here is showing what Christianity looked like or where it was found before Constantine converted Rome to Christianity. You see its little pockets here and there. But after he converted the entire empire to Christianity, Christianity could be found all around Rome, which was a huge empire. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Christian church became very powerful in Europe. America was founded by European countries, which is why there are so many Christians in America today. So you guys learned about the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and how important the Catholic Church was. That was because, thanks to Constantine, the Roman Empire had made the Catholic Church so important here. And so you can see Christianity spread all around the world. And we see a lot here in Europe. One of the reasons why this area is so heavily Christian is that this area was colonized by European countries. And so they brought that culture and that religion over to this area. And finally, we're going to talk about Islam. Islam is the third monotheistic religion, and it was founded about 2,500 years after Judaism began. But it also came from a sect related to Judaism. Muhammad was the founder. Like Christianity and Judaism, Islam began in the Middle East. So all three of these religions started in the same place in the Middle East. Here's the official symbol for Islam. This is showing the 5 pillars, the 5 things a good Muslim must do in order to maintain their faith. Islam spread rapidly along the Middle East and North Africa through 2 major ways. One, through peaceful merchants. Merchants would go to different areas. They weren't trying to spread Islam, but they would just say, like, hey, I'm Muslim. Like, I'm going to share my, would you like to hear more about my practices? And by people hearing more about the practices through these merchants, entire civilizations began to convert to Islam. Another way that Islam spread was through violent conquest, so warfare. People would wage holy wars against non Muslim areas in order to convert them to Islam. So, both peaceful and violent ways to spread Islam. If we were to look at a map of Islam today, we see that most of Islam is located in here, the North Africa and the Middle East. So Islam spread very, very rapidly through peaceful and violent ways, and we find it mostly in the Middle East and in North Africa today. On the map, what I want you to circle is right here. That's the Middle East. So circle that area. That is where all 3 monotheistic religions began. We're going to skip the video that goes with this and keep moving and look at African kingdoms. So we've learned about these 3 major religions, and one of these religions, Islam, spreads to these African kingdoms. So let's look at what these kingdoms were like before, during, and after this of Islam. So 3 African kingdoms emerged along the Niger River. Here's the Niger River. And what we already know, civilizations need those rivers for trade and for farming, farming primarily and then trade. So here we are in New Orleans. This is the area that we're talking about, this Horn of Africa. And what you guys learned this year is that this area had some of the most powerful kingdoms in the world. Ghana, Mali, and Songhai were all kingdoms in this area. They came one after the other. Mali and Songhai, the second 2, were both Muslim empires, but Ghana existed before the widespread growth of Islam in West Africa, so they didn't practice Islam as an official religion. However, many citizens within Ghana did convert to Islam by the time it had fallen, but it wasn't the official religion. So when we think about the West African kingdoms, one thing we should always think about is how they were Muslim empires. Mansa Musa of Mali was a really famous king who grew famous after taking a Hajj. That's a religious journey in Islam. He took this Hajj to Mecca. So he went from West Africa over to Mecca here in the Middle East. So that's a long journey. He's got to pass through a lot of different places to get there. He took an enormous caravan of people and spent so much money along the way that he devalued the gold in Egypt. So Mansa Musa tells us two different things about Mali. One, it was a very, very rich empire. Um, and two, this tells us that Islam was really important. This man was willing to spend so much gold, time, and energy going on this Hajj to Mecca. It shows that Islam was a very important religion to the West African kingdom of Mali. And so here is a timeline showing the different empires. We see Ghana begins, and when they fall, Mali begins. Songhai replaces Mali when Mali falls. And just like we saw with the Chinese dynasties, the first empire was small, the second empire was much larger, and then the third empire was the largest, Songhai. So these were the main three empires that we learned about. So we have to ask ourselves, how was Mansa Musa able to have so much money that he could spend enough to depress the value of gold? All three of these empires grew wealthy through trade. They would trade and tax gold and salt resources that were located in the empires. So, a major thing that they did is they had tons and tons of gold mines in these areas. So, not only would they mine gold and trade it, but they would tell others, hey, if you want to come here and mine some of our gold and then sell it, that's great, but we're going to tax you when you go through these trades. So, by taxing the salt and gold trade, these empires were able to get even more wealth. One thing that they did as a form of payment was they used something called cowrie shells. This helped them standardize their payment and to reduce the weight of like the money that was being carried long distances. So these shells helped it was like spending $1. They had a standardized value across the empire and they were much lighter than carrying gold. And so the more people who were coming to trade in these empires, the more wealth they were gaining. And they were able to maintain these empires by having very powerful militaries and armies. All right, you have a couple review questions, and there's a little blank space on your paper to write your answers. When you finish, raise your hand. Have a great day.